قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَعِظُكُمْ بِوَاحِدَةٍ أَن تَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ مَثْنَى وَفُرَادَى. That Allah says to the Prophet that, O Prophet, go and tell your community that I only advise you to do one thing. Innama, right? Only. That's my only request, my only advice to all of you is to do one thing. And that is that you do qiyam an taqumu lillahi mathna wa furada. That you only do qiyam for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether alone or in pairs, whether as individuals or as a congregation or as a community. Correct? Now, this is the ayah that Imam Khomeini, he believes that this ayah is the, sort of, when it comes to the practical side of things, this verse of the Quran sums it up. He said this is it. And I want to actually show you guys something very interesting. So, in 1944, Imam Khomeini visited a library in Yazd, city of Yazd, and this library is called Kitabkhane Vaziri. It's not an ancient library. It was built around, not at the same time, but maybe a bit earlier than that. But it's like, just over 100 years ago, the library. And in 1944, Imam Khomeini visited this library. And outside, so he was young. He was not very old at that time. And what happens is, when you leave the library, some of these museums and some of these libraries, they have these, books where people who kind of visited, you can kind of leave a note in those books and your feedback and suggestions and advice, and you talk about your experience, and then you kind of just leave it there. So Imam Khomeini visits this library in 1944. And in that book that was there in the library, he writes a note. And that note, actually, we still have. And the custodians of the library and the sort of, the caretakers of the library, they have preserved this this sort of paper. And I will show you the picture of this paper. So this is the actual handwriting of Imam Khomeini writing that letter. This is the letter that he had written, and I will, inshallah, we will read through this letter. So if you can kind of make out the Arabic, he kind of starts, قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَعِدُكُمْ بِوَاحِدَةٍ أَن تَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ مَثْنَى وَفُرَادَى. So he starts the ayah over here, and this is his handwriting, and as I said, this handwriting has been preserved. Now let's look at the actual letter. What did Imam Khomeini actually write? And this is all preserved, obviously, in in the works of Imam Khomeini. These things are all preserved and whatnot. But let's summarize. Let's see what he wrote when he was such a young individual. He was very young at that time. He says, قال الله تعالى قل إنما أعدكم بواحدة أن تقوموا لله مثنى وفرادى. Imam Khomeini writes that Allah says this ayah of the Quran. He says, خدای تعالی در این کلام شریف از سر منزل تاریک طبیعت تا منتهای سیر انسانیت را بیان کرده. That in this ayah of the Quran, Allah has outlined the journey from the sort of the darkness of nature to the muntaha, to the pinnacle of humans' spiritual journey. And this is the best advice Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to has chosen to give. God has chosen from among all of the advices and has proposed this specific advice to all of humanity. And he says, "In kalame tanha rah islah do jahan ast." This is the only way to fix both our lives, the dunya and the akhirah. Qiyam baray khudas ki Ibrahim khalil. So then he goes on. He says that the qiyam, inshallah, I will discuss what is this qiyam and how is Imam Khomeini interpreting it. Just let me finish the letter. That he says this qiyam means to stand up. That's what it means. Literally, it means to stand up. So this standing up is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it was this qiyam that brought Ibrahim alayhi salam, the friend of Allah, the Khalilullah, to the station of friendship. Okay, this is the one that brought him to this status of Khalil and freed him from the Jalwahai Gunagune Alam Tabiyat, that freed him from the sort of the shackles and the different manifestations of the natural world. Qiyam lillah ast ke Musa Kalim ra ba yek asab fir'auniyan chire kard. It was the qiyam for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that allowed Musa that with a single staff that he was able to overpower Fir'aun and all of his kingdom, and then led him to the appointment with his beloved and elevated him to the station of Sa'ak wa Sahu, which is this is the mystical jargon, and it is the qiyam barai khudast. It was the qiyam for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that allowed the Holy Prophet Khatamun Nabiyyin to basically like single-handedly overcome all the customs and beliefs of the Jahiliyat, the aqaid of the Jahiliyat. And he was able to remove the idols from the house of Allah and replace them with Tawheed and Taqwa. And it brought the Prophet to the station of Qaba Qawsaini aw Adna, that Allah brought his station up to the distance of 2 bows, a bow length or even nearer. This is in the Quran. He says, selfishness and abandonment of standing for God have brought us to this dark age. So he said, okay, so Allah is saying, do qiyam for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why are we in this state? He says, it is because we have abandoned qiyam for the sake of Allah, and instead we do qiyam for our own selves. And it was this qiyam for the self that has brought us to this dark age. And it has made the entire world dominate us. و همه جهانیان را بر ما چیره کرده و کشورهای اسلامی را زیر نفوذ دیگران آورده. And it has brought all the Islamic countries under the influence of others. Remember, this is the time of Raza Shah. Okay, the father of the Shah that Imam Khomeini brought a revolution against. His father, it was still ruling over there. And there are dozens and dozens of different political parties, and even many students that were coming out of the Hawza. Some of them were just very liberal, very anti, Hawza, and there's a lot of things going on politically speaking. Qiyam barai manafi shakhsi ast. He said, what we do is we do qiyam for our own personal gain. It is this qiyam for ourselves that has suffocated the spirit of unity and brotherhood in Millat-e Islami, in the Muslim Ummah. It is the qiyam for our personal interests that has scattered and separated more than 10 million Shia in such a way that they have become prey to a few seat-loving, lustful people. That just a couple of people who are just interested in power and politics and winning these seats. It is just, the qiyam for ourselves. We do things for our own selves. And it is this that has allowed a few people to rule 10 million Shias. It is the qiyam for ourselves that allows an illiterate Mazandarani. Qiyam barai shakhs ast ke yek nafar Mazandarani bi sawad, which is Raza Khan. He's talking about Raza Khan. I guess he was from Mazandaran. I didn't know this. That it has allowed this bi sawad means illiterate. That this illiterate individual from Mazandaran to dominate a multi-million group, making their wealth and offspring a victim of his desires. It is the qiyam for personal interests that now places a few street children in charge of the property, lives, and honor of Muslims across the country. It is the qiyam barai nafs ammare. Okay, so it is the qiyam for the nafs ammara, the commanding self, that has turned the schools of knowledge and wisdom into centers of immorality, handing over the educational institutions of the Quran to a few simple-minded children. Look how angry he is. Look how he's fed up. Okay, he's fed up. And the revolution is going to come many years later, okay, 44, 50, 60, 70, yani more than 30, 35 years later, the revolution's gonna come. But it's just interesting to see how he was looking at the world. This is not, don't think this was like everybody was thinking like this. No, it was him. He was looking at the world from a very different lens very early on. The pursuit of the command, okay? And he's concerned. He's like, why are these bunch of hooligans ruling over 10 million Shia? And why are all these non-Muslim countries coming and dominating us? For what? What the heck for? It is the qiyam for the self that has handed over the waqf, the endowments of schools and religious circles to a few dishonorable, losers without any opposition. These dishonorable people come and they are handling our schools and religious hawzat and schools, and there's no opposition. It is the qiyam baray nafs ke chadar iffat ra az sar zanhay afif musalman bardasht. It is the qiyam for the self that has removed the veil of modesty from our chaste Muslim women. And even now, this illegal and anti-religious act continues in the country without anyone voicing opposition. It is the qiyam for the self that newspapers, which spread moral corruption, continue to follow the same plans that stemmed from the vile mind of Raza Khan, spreading amongst the masses. And then qiyam barai khudas. It is the pursuit of the self that has allowed some fraudulent parliamentarians to speak against religion and spirituality in the parliament without any question. Now at the end he addresses the scholars. O Islamic scholars, O you ulama Rabbani, you learned ones, Danishmandan Deendar, O religious people, religious scholars, O speakers of faith, and O believers, O righteous ones, O honorable truth seekers, O honorable patriots, read the advice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, read the ayah. و یگانه راه اصلاحی را که پیشنهاد فرموده بپذیرید. Look at what Allah has said and accept the only proposed solution of reform. Okay, and abandon your personal gains to attain all the blessings of both worlds and embrace the life of honorable existence in both realms. Indeed, in the days of your lifetime there are nafahat, there are divine sort of breaths and breezes, and beware of turning away from them. This is from a narration. Today is the day when the divine spiritual breeze is blowing, making it the best day for reform basically. If you miss the opportunity and do not stand for Allah and do not revive religious practices, tomorrow a bunch of lustful, losers will dominate you and turn all your religion and honor into instruments for their false desires. Today, what excuse do you have before the Lord of the worlds? You all saw the books of a lowly Tabrizi who insulted. So this Tabrizi is Ahmad Kasravi. He was someone who had studied in the Hawza, and he came out and he became a very anti-religious person. So he's saying this lowly Tabrizi guy from Tabriz who insulted your entire religion and dared to disrespect Imam Sadiq and Imam Mahdi in the heart of Shi'ism, like in our country, and no word came out from any of you. What excuse do you have in Allah's court today? What weakness and misery has overtaken you? O respectable Aghay Muhtaram, ke in safahat ra jam awari namudid. O respectful individuals who have collected these pages and presenting them to the scholars of the land and speakers. It would be good if you also compiled a book that unites their division and makes all of them collaborate in Islamic goals. So this book that Imam Khomeini is writing the letter in, the custodian of the library at that time was getting many different ulama to write in it. So I think he had gotten like these remarks from almost 200 scholars and maraji. So maybe I think he's addressing that over here. Instead of getting all these messages from different speakers, different scholars, it would be good if you also compiled a book that unites their division and makes all of them collaborate in Islamic goals, taking signatures from everyone so that if any disrespect occurs towards religion in any corner of the country, everyone would rise as one. At least this level of religious commitment from the Baha'is, who, if one of them lives in a village, maintain contact with him from their sensitive centers, and if any transgression happens to him, they rise for him. You did not stand for your legitimate rights, so the audacious, godless people rose up and began the whisper of godlessness in every corner, and soon they will dominate you in such a way that your condition will be worse than during Raza Khan's time. Look, he is already predicting, he's saying it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse, and if you don't fix up your basically actions. Okay, so that's what he says. This is Imam Khomeini in 1944.